Hi, it's time for a chime video. 2 months ago, almost to the day, I did a quick overview of this chime base. This is a Series 2 NuTone chime base, probably from 1940, 1941 would be my best guess. That's the video, and I'll link it in. There'll be one of those tag things that pops up right here that you will link to the other video. That's the one with the motor assembly that had a date code stamped in it of July 39. So I think the motor assembly was made in 39, so the chime probably 40 or 41, depending on how many they built at a time. This particular chime required a lot of work. It took much longer than average. It's not usually 2 months to complete a chime rebuild on something like this, but we ran into a snag almost immediately, and the snag was this. This is the motor assembly that was originally in the chime. This is the one with the date stamp of July 1939. And what I found with this was the gear drive assembly, which is this part right here that the motor, which is on the other side, turns. The gear drive assembly there's something wrong with it. It will not, the motor doesn't spin the shaft, and when I turn it with my fingers, it catches and binds up and it won't turn, and then it breaks loose and it just freewheels in there, and so something inside of this is broken. These are not a repairable item. In fact, the way it's put together, it looks like this end cap here is soldered onto the body of the rest of it, and what's inside one of these exactly is a mystery, because I've never seen inside one of those, and there's no drawings or anything that shows that. I had to launch into a search to see if I could figure out what to do, because this customer really wanted his chime to play again. After nearly 2 months of searching, I was able to come across another similar NuTone chime base that was a reasonable price that I could use basically as a parts unit. It gave up its motor and gear drive assembly for this customer's chime. That's the only way to deal with this at this point. One of the nice things about that particular transaction was, along with the other chime base came a set of 4 tubes. I now have a complete set of the correct tubes for early NuTone Series 2 door chimes. So that was sort of an added bonus. So once we got the new motor assembly, it was serviced. The rest of the base assembly was serviced also. All of the contact points were cleaned. All of the plungers and solenoids were cleaned also. They were all actually in fairly good shape. The volume adjustment rheostat here was replaced with one that we built in-house because the other one had fallen apart and somebody modified it and it really wasn't the right thing. I wired it back up. I replaced all the old crusty cloth covered wire inside of it with modern wire so it would be safe, because right here, I think you can maybe see this connection right here, which is live right now because it's powered up from the bench power supply. This is 110 volts because this unit has its own internal transformer. Put it all back together, lined it all up, made some adjustments, and it worked the first time. That was good. We've got a light bulb in the socket here, and the little pull cord turns the light on and off. To finish this, to make it complete, but I'm going to leave it for the customer to do, what he needs is a long piece of woven cord or something, probably with a nice little tassel on the end that connects to the bead connector here, so you can pull the accent light on and off. So I've got it set up here on our chime testing jig, and let's go ahead and ring it. So this is a 3-door chime, so we have 1 note for the rear door, and we have a different single note for the side door. And then of course we have 8 notes for the front door. Just like that. So let's go ahead and ring it one more time. And now that we know it works correctly, we have one more thing we have to do. And this is important. Anybody who has one of these chimes needs to understand this, because it's very important, especially if you send it off for repair and then you get it back and you have to reinstall it. But before we get to the final thing that needs to be done, let's talk about adjusting a chime like this so it sounds the way it was intended to. You simply have two adjustments available to you when you install a chime like this. You have the volume adjustment here on the volume rheostat, and there's this little lever right back here on the back side of this particular one. Different models will have different variations of this, but they all have something fundamentally the same. And the way it works is so this is the top. The further you move the lever down away from the top, the softer the plungers strike the tubes. That makes it quieter. If you move it up towards the top, it gets louder and louder until it's all the way up at the top, and that's the loudest it can be. It makes the plungers strike as hard as they possibly can. The first mistake that everybody does is they immediately want to crank it up to full. They want to put it all the way up at the top and make it strike as hard as it possibly can. That's oftentimes unnecessary, and that's not where you should start. The other adjustment that you have is the distance of the tube, the back of the tube, the part back here that you can't see, how close it is to the opening where the plunger pops out. Now the plungers on these, they don't pop out very far. It's not like later models that have tips on them that are nearly 3/8 of an inch long. These are very, very short. So the tubes need to be somewhat close, but not too close, and also not too far away. So what they did on models like this is, and we'll go ahead and take this one down. And you have to be careful because you don't want to wreck the cord, and you don't want to drop the tube because then you'll bend the bottom of it. So we'll put this over here. You have this little knurled adjustment nut here. You have an acorn nut on the end that keeps things from falling off, and there's a little threaded rod, and then you have a little knurled adjustment nut, and as you turn it, it moves the tube in and out, so it's either closer or further away from the plunger tip. So you have to play with this. There is no absolute setting for these, because the way you have to look at this is it's like tuning a musical instrument. Each tube is going to be somewhat different than its neighbor tube because they're all individually made, and where each one should be will vary based on how it sounds. Now you certainly can start with them all relatively even, although the difference, if you make one revolution of the adjustment, the amount you're moving it is very, very, very small. So you have to play with it to see. So the correct way to do this is, basically what you want to start off with is a distance between the back of the tube and the front of the case, the metal part, that would be the plane of the face. You want a gap of about 3/16 of an inch. That's a good starting point. And you want your volume adjustment set just very slightly under half is good. These have strong solenoids in them, they strike well, and they certainly don't need to be at maximum. The problem that you can get into is if the tubes are too close and the strength of the strike is too high, too strong, when the plunger hits the tube, if my hand is the tube and here's the plunger, when the plunger hits the tube, if it's too close, it actually will push the tube out, and then as the plunger goes back away from the tube swings back in, and you get a double strike. And you don't want that. You want it to strike the tube just enough so it makes the right sound, and then it retreats back into the solenoid, and that's it. So if we turn this on, or it is on, if we just do a single note, That's probably about right. This is the other single note. And of course, they're going to sound different because they're different notes. Now, if we ring the whole thing, you have to judge how it sounds. Now, if you're in a moderate sized house, the volume adjustment is probably about fine. There's a tendency nowadays, everybody wants everything to be full out, full maximum, as loud as it possibly be, and that's not always necessary. You need to actually put some time and a little bit of effort into adjusting it so it sounds right. And that's the best way to do it. So now we do have one last thing to do. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the tubes off carefully, because I don't want to damage my new vintage set of tubes. These are hard to come by, especially ones that are in good shape like these are. Fortunately, I don't think any of them have any cracks, which is a hard thing nowadays, because generally at this point, being as old as this is, usually there's cracks in at least one end somewhere. Those are all good. So we'll take those down. So what's the very last thing we're going to do? The very last thing we're going to do is we're going to use some blue masking tape. And what are we going to do with that, you say? Well, first we're going to tear off a piece about that long. And now we're going to take the blue masking tape and we're going to put it over the front of the solenoid bores. And we're going to wrap it around the side, and we're going to fold it in on the bottom, and we're going to fold it like this. And then we're going to get our marker and we're going to write something on it. What are we going to write? We're going to write, "Do not ring without tubes." And then we're going to put like a line and some arrows as a warning. So why is that important? Okay, and this comes directly from the original NuTone installation instructions that came with a chime like this. The way this is designed, the plungers are in the front and the springs are on the back of the plungers. There is no stop on the front of the opening where the plungers pop out. So in practice, if you were to push the button and ring the chime without any tubes in place, the plunger is going to rocket out of the solenoid bore, and the only thing that's going to keep it from flying out onto the floor is the spring. Now the spring is attached to the end of the plunger in a little groove. This is not a super strong connection. When we repair these, we have a way to make it a little better than it was when it was brand new. But regardless of that, the idea behind the way this was designed is when the tube is in place like this, the tube acts as the stop for the plunger. So why am I going over this? Why is this an issue? It's an issue because when units like this are sent back to people and they put it back on the wall and they hook it all back up, the very first thing they want to do is they want to run out and push the button on the front porch before they've hung the tubes to see if it works. And when you do that, the plungers are going to rocket out of the solenoids, and if it comes loose from the spring, the plunger goes like this and lands somewhere across the room, or it rolls across the entryway down in the heating grate or some other thing. It says in the original NuTone instructions, do not operate the chime until the tubes have been hung, and this is very important. I know when you get your chime back, you're all excited and you want to try it out and everything, but you've got to do it the right way. If you don't, then some of the work that we just finished to make it work as well as it possibly can, it was for nothing, and then there's a phone call and it's like, well, the plungers came out and it fell across the floor and we don't know if we can find it or not. And don't be one of those people, okay? So that's why now I put the tape on them because also when you ship it, it helps make sure it doesn't jostle around too much. But it's primarily so that when people get them back, they won't ring it until they hang the tubes. And of course, it's only befitting to such a nice chime to actually show what it looks like lit up with the proper cover on it. Now, this is not the cover that belongs to the customer. This is one of the covers that I have. And it is not exactly the same as the customer's cover, but it is a period correct cover for a chime from 1939 or 1940. This one happens to be in a garnet red or sort of a tortoiseshell finish, and we can ring it and you have this nice amount of accent light that shines down the brass tubes and looks really cool at night. And that's not all we can do. We can also change it to a different one. And here we have a second cover, and this one is different. This one is the same style and it's from the same period, and I hope you can see the difference. I'll have to see when I edit the video. And this one is in a butterscotch finish. And both of these covers, these are very rare NuTone Catalan covers. And Catalan covers were only used before World War II. They only made them for a short amount of time, and they're very highly sought after because they have a really nice sort of Art Deco look. They have this nice engraved plaque in the middle. They're translucent, so when the accent light is on, they show like this at night in your house. It looks a little different in real life. There's what looks like a bright spot right here. It's because of the camera. You don't really see that when you look at it just with your eyes. But we'll ring it one more time. And there you have it. I put the garnet red or tortoiseshell cover back on because that's the one that I like the best. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for some of you it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.